The Iowa women get a bounce-back win against Washington. Was it a season saver? This thing's not over yet. The first quad one win, we break it down today. Locked on Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, hit subscribe. Just takes you a moment and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Well, that was more like it. The Iowa women, after the 5 consecutive losses, look like the team I think a lot of us expected they were going to be throughout the course of this season. A lot of close losses, and this one was a laugher, a dominating performance. We're going to break things down with that one coming up here in a moment. We got a couple other news and notes to get into as well. We're going to talk Iowa baseball has released their schedule coming up this spring. Their official schedule is out there. Opportunities to see the Hawkeyes in action there, and a couple other news and notes, and more on Iowa men's basketball and some of the conversations that we had on yesterday's program after that just pitiful effort against Minnesota, taking the loss there, and just the future of the program, and some comments that have come in, and we'll react to some of those. Plus, David Eichold is going to join us from 24/7 Sports. It is HawkeyeInsider.com, and we'll talk Hawkeyes with David Eichold coming up here in just a moment. But let's look back at what we just saw as the Iowa women get the victory over Washington in one of the more eye-opening performances, certainly of the year for this squad. So they come to this one a 5.5-point favorite on the road after the 5 consecutive losses, and a lot of people maybe scratching their head a little bit. Iowa dictated style. We knew this was a good offensive team for Washington coming in. They held them to 61 points. They got up and down the floor. And the thing that I love to see in this game was, anybody looks good making shots, right? I mean, it's a simple equation in basketball. It doesn't matter what level. We'd be talking about fourth graders, or we could be talking about NBA. You're making shots, you're going to look pretty good, at least offensively. And that was the case in that one. But the ball movement was much crisper. The game plan looked really solidified. And they went out there. They went out as a group. There was no return. So it was a lot of time together. It was a lot of time maybe to have some hard conversations. And I haven't heard from Jan Jetson in her post-game press conference as we speak here. That is, in fact, going on right now. So haven't had an opportunity to listen to that. But I would think that 5-game losing streak, those are those times you got those come to Jesus moments. Look, this women's basketball team is a lot better than their 12-7 record was going into this game. They lost so many tight games. And you look back, Maryland just never could get back over the hump. They were outplayed by the Terrapins. And credit Brenna Friese's group. They came into Carver-Hawkeye Arena and playing at a really high level. But to lose to a depleted Illinois team, even on the road in that fashion, to get down against Indiana and never be able to get back over the hump, to blow a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter against Nebraska, to blow another double-digit lead against Oregon. This team is better than their record indicates, but what is it, Bill Parcells? You are what your record says you are. This is now a 13-7 team, and they still have a lot of work to do. We'll talk about how much work still needs to be done because there are some good numbers with this squad. But back to the game at hand. Mentioned the ball movement and what we saw out of this group and just the ability getting up and down the floor. Lucy Olson was really, really locked in. I thought 6 assists in the game. She controlled it, didn't have the silly turnovers, but it was the ball movement. And it doesn't just start with that. There was a whole lot more to it. So love to see that. There was a stretch during, I believe it was the second quarter, end of the second quarter, where Lucy Olson was out there with the freshmen. So it was Stremlo and Hayden and Mulaney was out there and Aaliyah Guyton. And it was just fun watching that group together and thinking about what the future is going to be. Lucy Olson's not going to be a part of that as this is their only year of eligibility at Iowa. But just, again, thinking about that future. And they all did some good things. You know, Aaliyah Guyton hits her only shot of the game, had an assist, got called for a charge, which is, I guess. But the veterans step back up. And we're going to have that throughout the course of this one. Addison O'Grady, loved what they did with her. posting and then reposting. You throw it inside, she throws it back out, go right back to her. And we hadn't seen enough of that. And that goes back to the ball movement component that we talked about in this game. 18 assists out of 33 made field goals for the Hawks. Now, you start off the game 8 of 8 from the three-point line. They finished 9 of 13, so just 1 of 5 in the second half. But overall, the ball movement, the ability of going inside, some of the double post stuff that they were doing too, just something that hasn't felt like it's been part of the playbook for quite a while. We know what Taylor McCabe can be. She's knocking down three-pointers, and she did that again. Sita Fulter hits her only shot from behind the arc, but she was doing a whole lot more. And then Kylie Feuerbach. Boy, you would love Feuerbach just to be more consistent. It's been so up and down throughout her career. And, for these group of veterans, these players that have played with Caitlin Clark and know that this is going to be different. I know that your role is going to be different. The way you're defended is going to be a whole lot different. There is a learning process to it. You hate that it took this long and that it took a 5-game losing streak to get to this point. Let's hope this is something that is going to be good. This is going to catapult this team to the back half because there's still an opportunity. After the loss to Oregon, there were a lot of people, probably myself included, throwing dirt on this team, right? Not going to be a tournament team. It'll be to the women's NIT and nobody cares. And it sucks. It really does for the program and what's been built, not just the last couple of years with Caitlin Clark and the back-to-back appearances in the national championship, but really over the last 5-6 years and going from a nice, solid program and the way that they have elevated past that. That would be a detriment to miss the NCAA tournament. Now, it's not going to be easy. They still have work that needs to be done. Now, you look at some of the numbers, the raw numbers. After the victory, and this is not all the games are final as we're sitting here on Wednesday evening, but the net rating is 37. Their non-conference strength of schedule is 25th. That's going to help. You coupled with their strength of schedule overall is 7th in the country. And remember, they still have to take on 2 top 5 teams in USC and UCLA, plus 3 other games against ranked teams at Minnesota, at Ohio State, and at Michigan. That strength of schedule is going to get even better and one of the best in the country. So I believe that Iowa has to get to 8-10 in the Big Ten to feel good about being a tournament team, to feel like they're at least in solid ground going into the Big Ten tournament. Now, again, depending on the way seeding goes and you get upset by a bad team in your first game, different conversation, but in the here and now, 8-10, I think will get them there. They sit at 3-6. So that means you got to go down the stretch here 5-4. Well, 5-4 shouldn't be that difficult, right? There are 3 games that are, you hate to say automatics, but they really should be automatics. The next one next Tuesday against Northwestern. They also have a home game in the middle of February against Rutgers, who's 8-11. They're net at 121. And the finale of the regular season against Wisconsin, their net's at 112. All 3 of those games are at Carver-Hawkeye Arena. These are 3 games that Iowa should win and win handily. So let's do that. Let's give them those 3 victories. And I know we're jumping to conclusions here, but just for argument's sake, let's do that. Well, that puts them at 6 wins. So we got to find 2 more victories out of this group. Tell me when you find 2. USC on Sunday, February 2nd. USC is 18-1. Juju Watkins, they're incredibly good. They're incredibly talented. Not a great matchup for Iowa. They go to Minnesota. The Gophers are 17-3, ranked 23rd in the country, and you're going on the road. You go to Nebraska, who just beat you in Carver. Again, we're looking for 2 victories here. At Ohio State, who's 16-1 and ranked 12th in the country. You get a home game against UCLA, the number 1 team in the country, 18-0, and a road trip to Michigan, who's ranked 24th. In that, finding 2 wins. The most likely would be at Nebraska and at Michigan, I guess. Maybe at Minnesota. And you get both those wins. You get 2 of those road victories. I think you're going to be in good shape. Again, the strength of schedule is going to be there. I'll tell you what, you don't think the tournament committee, if it comes down to it, wouldn't love to put the Iowa Hawkeyes in there. Yes, we know there's no Caitlin Clark, but if it came down to it and putting that final team or 2 in the NCAA tournament and your opportunities are a mid-major, a power conference team that has a middling record, and the Iowa Hawkeyes with a middling record, who are they going to take? For once, it's good to be a Hawkeye. It's good to be a Hawkeye after getting this win, their first quad 1 victory of the season with the road win at Washington. Now they get some time to get back, settle themselves after the long road trip, 6 days off before they face off next Tuesday against Northwestern before the big one with USC come to town on February 2nd. Well, we got a whole lot more Hawkeyes to talk about as we're going to be joined by David Eichold from 24/7 Sports. Him and Sean Bach do a great job over there. If you're a Hawkeye fan, it is a must stop each and every day to find the latest going on in the world of the Hawkeyes. We got you covered on the audio side each and every day. Speaking of that, David's got a podcast of his own. He's got a little something for you coming up here. We talk with David Eichold a lot on the Iowa men's basketball team, the program, and the future of men's athletics. We do it with David Eichold as we continue Locked On Hawkeyes. Therapy is a game changer. It can help manage stress, improve sleep, and communicate more effectively. But finding the right therapist and fitting sessions into a busy schedule can be a challenge. That's where Talkspace comes in. Talkspace, the leading virtual therapy provider, makes getting the help you need easy, accessible, and affordable. With Talkspace, signing up is simple. You can match with a licensed therapist who fits your needs, usually within 48 hours. And it's convenient. You can have sessions from the comfort of your home and even message your therapist between appointments. Plus, Talkspace is covered by many insurance plans. And for most insured members, there's a $0 copay. It's never been easier to prioritize mental health. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $80 off your first month with Talkspace when you go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege. Make sure you enter the promo code SPACE80. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege and make sure you enter that promo code SPACE80 to get $80 off your first month and show your support for Locked On Hawkeyes. That's Talkspace.com/LockedOnCollege and the promo code SPACE80.
Let's get to David Eichold. David joins us. He was in the building last night at Carver. Beth Getz was there. What do you think, Scott? Good to talk to you, David. I know you can't read minds, but if you could, what do you think Beth Getz was going through her mind as she watched what was unfolding and looked around and saw the empty seats? Granted, Tuesday night, late tip, cold night. I'll give you all those things. But what do you think Beth Getz's takeaway would have been from that last night?
Well, I can tell you what mine is I'm not jealous of her because that's such a difficult situation. But look, Beth Getz is as self-aware of an athletic director as I've talked to. I mean, she knows that things need to improve. She knows that the apathy is set in. I don't think it's reasonable for any athletic director to be in the building last night, to look around and to think that that was acceptable, right? And I know people want to point to, yes, it was a weeknight tip. Yes, it was late. Yes, it was like -8 degrees wind chill last night. But if Iowa splits that road trip, there's people in that building. If they win both games, there's people in that building. I think she knows that she has a very, very big decision to make here over the next 2 months. And I can tell you that from listening to her interview, I know she did an interview with Chad Leistico, I believe, about a month ago. Mm-hmm. She would not speculate on Fran's future by any means, but she knows that there has to be, I don't want to say a complete overhaul, but there has to be more of an investment in the men's basketball program if they want to get back up to the level that they want to get up to.
You know, I hear this one a lot, and I put together a board last night of just some people that would make a whole lot of sense if Iowa would move on from Fran. And some of the pushback I saw, well, how are they going to be able to afford this? Look, when Iowa State needed to fire Steve Prohm, they owed him the buyout, which is about $5 million. On top of it, they had to pay TJ Otzelberger's buyout from UNLV. It was a combined $10 million. Now, Iowa financially is in a lot better spot than Iowa State certainly was at that time with the influx of TV money that they have been coming in here. Money shouldn't be an object, at least in my mind. Is it an object? Is money a concern here?
I would say it's a little bit of a concern, but scared money don't make money, Trent. I mean, if you want to get back up to the level they want to get up to, I think that they're going to have to dig deep a little bit. But more importantly, I think it's also worth noting, we talk about fan apathy. What about the donors that would come to light
exactly
with
right.
excitement if they wanted to make a move? Like, let's say they went out and wanted to go get Darren DeVries, right, from West Virginia. Now, look, Darren doesn't strike me as a guy that would leave a job after 1 year, but I think it's no secret that he would absolutely take multiple calls with Iowa about potentially coming back to the state of Iowa and into Iowa City. I don't think it's a secret that this would be one of his dream jobs, quote unquote, I would say here. But he's also might be the future Creighton head coach whenever McDermott decides to call it quits. I think that would be a realistic option for him as well. I'm not so strung up on the money as some people are. Yes, the revenue sharing is going to come to light soon, so I think that they have a lot of adjusting to do there. But I also think that there's enough people within the Iowa fan base that remembers, the 80s and 90s, which does seem like it's crazy long ago. But Iowa has been at the spot where they've been near the forefront of the sport. There is a proud basketball tradition at Iowa. It seems like it's gone away maybe since the Alford days or since last time they made a Sweet 16, 1999. We know that's been far too long. That's been a big kind of plague over the program. But if you're a major power conference university, and I would say an upper tier in the Big Ten, just as far as an athletic department, I'm not saying top 5 by any means, but you're probably in the top upper half, I would say, or at least around that area. You can afford 2 buyouts if Nebraska football can afford 4 buyouts and paying 4 contracts at the same time. I don't think it's as big of an issue as other people are going to make it out to be. I need to dive into the numbers, but I would expect that there'd be a significant amount of donors that would probably get a little bit excited about a potential new person at the helm.
I don't think they can afford not to, is how I see it with the apathy. Hear me out on this one, because I'm convinced that this has been set in stone, and it's just a matter of when, not if. We all know the Indianapolis connections, right? We know the Butler connections. We know Connor's girlfriend connection. All of those things seem to me that a homecoming in Indiana is in the cards. Do you think Beth Getz could wait Fran McCaffrey out to blink? That instead of firing Fran McCaffrey and paying the entire buyout, that McCaffrey blinks first when nothing seems to be headed in that direction. Therefore, they can come to some compromise and not have the price tag be what it would be if she outright fired him at the end of the year. What about that? Is that crazy?
No, but that's kind of my question of the day there. Ken, you knocked it out of the park with that one. Because I think if there's any time for this to make complete sense for both parties, it's right now. Jack McCaffrey going to play basketball at Butler, Connor McCaffrey being an assistant there. We know that, I know Caitlin has been a significant part about the McCaffrey's lives for probably the past couple of years, at least. I think it makes all the sense in the world on paper, where if they were going to have a mutual parting of ways, I think it would be a more graceful exit for Fran McCaffrey too, if they did mutually depart. But how much does that matter to Fran? I don't even want to begin to speculate, because I can see it going both ways. Because Fran, I think it's a bad rep for his character. I've said this. I think Fran's big downfall is the lack of postseason success and the lack of defense. But from an offensive standpoint, to go from Licklider to what they are at now, and I think from a team character perspective, I think Iowa's basketball team throughout Fran's tenure has had tremendous character. I think that's still an important piece of this element too. And as far as McCaffrey's kind of legacy, I think that's important as well. I think it would make a lot of sense, but I'm also not the type of person to talk about what somebody else should do with their money, right? Like if I'm Fran McCaffrey and I could get an extra $2.5 million, guess what? Selfishly, guys, I'll tell you what I would do. I'd be waiting it out. I wouldn't be blinking. That's a lot of money left on the table. I know he's been a basketball coach for so many years, probably has a very nice retirement plan and lifestyle set up, generational wealth type thing set up. But 7 figures is 7 figures. And I'm not about to tell somebody what they should be doing with their pocket change.
It's a nice thought, but I think a lot of us in a similar situation are not just going to be walking away because it's the right thing to do or it's time. They're going to be getting that money, and maybe it's some kind of buyout, some kind of agreement. Fran can retire if they want to go that route, but something certainly needs to be done. You know, another thing that bothered me last night, David, was, well, Peyton Stanford after the game complained about the officials being fouled 4 or 5 times, but it's one thing when your fan base is checked out. It's one thing when the coach appears to be checked out. These players appear to be checked out. To start the game as poorly as they did after that performance out in LA in the last 2 games, that said a lot about the guys. And these guys are competitors. These are Big Ten athletes. They just didn't look like they had a whole lot of want until the last couple of minutes of the game. That was hugely disappointing to me.
I hate speculating on people's efforts, Trent, but what I'd also point to is this. This has become a routine pattern for these Iowa games, right?
Yes.
They get down by double digits. A couple threes start to go in. Now, outside of last night, the threes were not going in, but they always pull it back in the last 5 or 6 minutes. And then you have an apathetic fan base who sits back and says, where's that fight then for the entire 40 minutes? Right? And I think that's been the most frustrating part because, when they were down by 13 or 15, I was texting a couple buddies, including my colleague Sean Bach, and we both said, Iowa's going to find a way to cut this to 2 possessions with a minute left, and Iowa's either going to have a heartbreaking loss or this is going to be just another story where I delete all 850 words of what I've written.
Yeah, you're not alone.
Right? So it's become a pattern. I think that's the most troubling of it all. Is the fact that there's not any consistency. And the one thing I'll say about Fran McCaffrey coach teams, there's never been any quit with them. I mean, how many times they got down by 20 over the years? They pull it back. They find a way to win. They don't quit. They really did not seem fired up and made the winning plays until, by the way, God bless that cheerleader. I'm happy to hear that he's moving his hands, moving his feet. That was a scary, scary, scary situation last night. They did not have any effort until there was an extended timeout because the cheerleader was injured on the floor.
Yeah.
When you're in the Big Ten Conference, you have to have 40 minutes of fight. We talk about how much of a gauntlet it is. You have to treat it like a gauntlet. You have to go out there because I'll call a spade, guys. That was a horrible Minnesota team last night.
Yeah.
They're not good. Dawson Garcia, he's a bucket getter. I think he's legitimately a very good player. But there's no other reason why some of those guys, they were making a 72-point effort from Minnesota look insanely more difficult than it should have been, just given the way everything unfolded last night.
Yeah, that's a bad Gophers team. I couldn't agree with you more. The last thing for you, David, end on a positive note, at least what I thought was a positive note. I thought it was the best I've ever seen Traore play in a Hawkeye uniform. Did you feel that way as well watching it? And if so, what does this mean going forward? What do Hawkeye fans expect now from Traore going forward?
Yeah, I mean, this is the guy where, we talked before the season. This is the type of Traore I was expecting Iowa to get. I thought he was outstanding in the full court press. I thought he was great on ball defense. His heart was in it. He was rebounding the basketball well, and he was taking smart shots. I think that was the other thing. When you look at earlier in the year, there were times where he would take an ill-advised shot or he was forcing it. I thought he played great last night. Fran was very happy with him. And I just think he brings a different sort of element. I think Ladji Dembele needs to sit behind him. I just don't think at this point he's ready. Traore brings a different sense of athleticism. He brings a different sense of length, on-ball defense, the pressure he can bring. He can do a variety of different things. And I'm sure you didn't have this on your bingo card. He was the guy that knocked in Iowa's first three with just over 12 minutes in the game. He knocked that in, and if he gets that going, I think he's a completely different player. So that's the type of guy you expected Iowa to get. And I think Fran looked at him last night and says, you know what? You got to play him more. And I think they're going to do that.
David Eichold, HawkeyeInsider.com. David, thanks for jumping on. Congrats on the Clark get. That'll be really good for you. A lot of clicks coming in your future for sure. Thank you, David. Good to talk to you.
Hey, thanks, guys. Have a good week.
Yep, you do the same. Say about David Eichold.
Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Look, attending NFL playoff games is an experience unlike any other. The energy, the excitement, and the connection with other fans is unmatched. I remember the thrill of seeing my Bears clinch a playoff game live. It was a while ago, but it's a memory I'll never forget. This year, GameTime makes it even easier to create those unforgettable moments with their new feature, GameTime Picks. It filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you can focus on what matters, being there. I use GameTime Picks to grab tickets for a playoff game, and I'll tell you what, it couldn't have been easier. I found a super deal, gave me incredible value for amazing seats, and I could even preview the view from my spot before buying. The all-in pricing is a game changer. No more surprise fees at checkout, plus knowing my tickets are backed by the GameTime guarantee gives me complete peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and make sure you use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege. LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Trent Cotta back with you one final time. Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for being with us and being with us each and every day. That's what we do. Hit that subscribe button. Lets you know each day when we are back with you, and we do it across the Locked On network. Well, let's get into a couple of news and notes to wrap things up. We're going to talk more about the men's program, kind of some big picture stuff. I think it's an incredibly pertinent topic. A lot of people have commented on the YouTube page. A lot of people that have checked in on Twitter. You can find me at Trent Condon, or you can also find us on at Locked On Iowa. On Twitter. X is where you can find us for the most of the time, also over on Blue Sky as well. But before we get into a couple of things to clear up there, the baseball schedule has been released for this year. There's plenty of things that we kind of knew about. More than anything, this was solidifying what they're going to do down in Florida, down in Texas, during the non-conference portion of the schedule. Now, remember a year ago, with the expectations coming into the year, Iowa preseason top 20 team by most everybody in the country, and disappointed at least on that front. They really stacked up that schedule and had a lot of tough losses early in the year. The bullpen imploded and just put them behind the 8-ball. A couple interesting notes. So they go to South Florida, open things up. No surprise there, taking on Florida. They're scheduled. I'll put it that way. They're scheduled to play Dolores in the home opener. Get this, February 18th. Okay, good luck. Down in Florida, they're going to take on Notre Dame, Stetson, and UMBC in the tournament there. Then they have a 4-game series against Washington State down in Texas. Interesting. And not a tournament, anything like that. It'll be a 4-game series against Wazoo. The Big Ten slate, pretty manageable overall. Do get the return. See Nebraska back on the schedule this year. Michigan's on there, Indiana. And then they wrap up the season really odd. They go to Seattle. That will be their last road series of the year. Obviously, the Huskies, a new member of the Big Ten. So they'll travel out to Seattle for that 3-game set. And then they are home to wrap up the season in Des Moines against Oregon State. That had been announced a while back, as the Beavers will come into town for the matchup Friday, Saturday, Sunday, May 9th through the 11th for that series. And then they will take on Oregon in the regular season finale before the Big Ten tournament in the final weekend of the year. So Oregon and Oregon State to wrap up. Washington, the last road. Yes, it is a different world of the Big Ten, and definitely jumped out there. We'll be talking plenty of baseball as we get closer to the schedule. Wrapping up with some basketball, and a lot of conversations that we've had here after the performance against Minnesota. We talked with David Eichold and looking towards the future. Now, I want to make this perfectly clear. People maybe that are joining us for the first time or just recently maybe don't know my overall thoughts on Fran McCaffrey. I was a big Fran backer. I was a guy that believed for the longest time that he was going to get this turned around, that we were going to see some positivity and we were going to see a run to that second weekend. And he's hit a ceiling. And it's going to happen. And is it fair? And what Fran has done, and at least bringing the program back to respectability, is it fair just to run him out after 2 disappointing seasons? Probably not. That's also the reality of the situation. But this is one thing that we're going to tackle a little bit more in the coming days and weeks. And it's this conversation that is out there about where Iowa is financially. And it just triggered into my mind when people are, well, Iowa can't afford it. I mean, you got to pay a buyout, a Fran McCaffrey. Even if you give him the full freight, he doesn't retire or walk away. And I don't understand why he would. It's his money. Signed a contract. Doesn't matter if it was Gary Barta that did it. It's still a contract. You got to pay the guy, right? But then might have to pay another buyout. Look, Iowa State 4 years ago paid nearly $10 million to bring TJ Otzelberger in from mid-major level at UNLV, firing Steve Prohm and bringing in TJ Otzelberger. That was 4 years ago when finances were much different in college athletics, and it was Iowa State. A Big 12 money, a little bit different than what the Big 10 and the Big 12 have. There's a pretty big gap there. Now, yes, Iowa doesn't have Denny Albaugh also writing checks, and I get that. However, to think that the woe is me, little old Iowa, that Iowa can't afford it, Iowa hasn't had to buy out a coach since Todd Licklider. That was 16 years ago. Iowa is sitting good. So we got to stop with this. And it's a loser mentality. You want to compete, you got to spend. And yes, it's going to take money to go get Darren DeVries. It's going to take money to go out and get Steve Forbes. It's going to take money to get Chris Jans, or even deeper down the list. It's going to take money. That's what college athletics is. And I'm going to guess most of us that are listening right now are not the ones writing those checks. They'll be fine. College athletics, the money is there. So enough with the woe is me. Iowa doesn't have enough money. That'll do it for today. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Don't forget Locked On Big Ten. Craig Sheeman doing the great work over there, talking all things Big Ten football and basketball. He's got you covered over there, and your favorite team. It doesn't matter. You're an NBA fan, your favorite NBA team, NHL, MLB. My Twins actually doing something in the offseason. Well, I'll be locked into the guys over at Locked On Twins, Locked On Bears with the new hire there. Hey, we got you covered. And it's not my favorite teams. It's your favorite teams every day on the Locked On Network. Thanks for being with us today. We will be back on Friday. Thanks for being with us, and go Hawks.